Hi, my name is J.C. Holman. This is the Anarcha Archive. Today, we're backing up a little bit to look at the people who were Anarcha's final owners. It turns out there's a fascinating story there that has been misidentified in history for many years.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
This is Lydia Maria Child, a prolific 19th century author and abolitionist. Child was most famous for the lines, "Over the river and through the woods to grandfather's house we go." But she was also a fervent and tireless advocate for the end of slavery. In 1859, shortly after John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry, Child wrote a letter to Governor Henry Wise of Virginia, ostensibly to request permission to visit Brown in jail to tend to his wounds while he awaited execution. Wise wrote back to say, of course, Child could visit. It was a free country. But I think the whole thing was a ruse, intended to attract publicity. Child's original letter and Wise's reply was printed in the newspapers in New York. The letters printed in the newspapers elicited a response from a woman named Mrs. Mason from Virginia. Mrs. Mason excoriated Lydia Maria Child, and Child wrote back in an even more robust fashion. There was very little information about this Mrs. Mason, and for years she was misidentified as the wife of a Virginia politician. In any event, all of the letters from this sequence, Lydia Maria Child's letters with Governor Wise, a letter from John Brown, and then Mrs. Mason's letter and Child's reply, were printed in pamphlet form by the Antislavery Society. 300,000 copies were sent all over the country. There were only 30 million citizens of the United States at that time. That would be the equivalent of 33 million copies of a pamphlet today. So who was this Mrs. Mason?
In a previous video, we established that Anarcha's final enslaver, or at least the person who was leasing her, was a man named Charles Mason of King George, Virginia.
And we know that Mason lived on a plantation called Alto. That's the clincher. In the pamphlet published by the Anti-Slavery Society, the return address of Mrs. Mason is listed as Alto in King George, Virginia. And here's where it gets really crazy.
Charles Mason's wife wasn't just anybody. And actually, she wasn't even his first wife. Mason was first married to a great-granddaughter of a signer of the Declaration of Independence. His second wife, Maria Jefferson Carr Randolph, was a great-granddaughter of Thomas Jefferson, and she signed her name to her letter to Lydia Maria Child, M.J.C. Mason, Maria Jefferson Carr Mason.
And she was born here, Tufton, one of several small plantations that Jefferson owned around Monticello, near Charlottesville, Virginia. Maria was born in February 1826, and it was said that she sat on the lap of her great-grandfather, Thomas Jefferson, shortly before he died. I learned all this during a month of study that I did at the International Center for Jefferson Studies here in Charlottesville. As part of the residency, I actually stayed in this house. Portions of my book, say Anarcha, were written in the home where her final owner had been born.
During that month, I managed to find a descendant of Charles and Maria Mason. He had portraits of both of them. Maria Mason was the same age as Anarcha.
Many years later, Maria married Charles Mason and moved to his plantation Alto in King George. A few years after that, as the Civil War loomed, John Brown raided Harper's Ferry, and the episode involving Lydia Maria Child's letter transpired. It was said that Child's response to Mrs. Mason, in particular, helped to prepare the North for the war that was to come. Anarcha arrived a few years later. Next time, we'll go into how I found her actual gravesite, but what we can say right now is that Anarcha's final years overlapped with the legacy of Thomas Jefferson, and in particular, with an episode that served as an important prologue to the Civil War.
Whoa, 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 whoa.